Hello, everyone. This is Mike Harley. I am the director of the Southern Exposure New Music Series in Columbia, South Carolina, at the University of South Carolina. And it is my great pleasure and honor to have with me composer John Luther Adams, winner of the Pulitzer Prize, Grammy Award, and many other honors. And John, it's a real pleasure to speak with you. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Nice to see you again,
Uh,
Mike.
yeah. So we were talking a little bit, and I had no idea that you actually spent some time in Columbia, South Carolina, first and second grade.
That's right.
Um,
That's right.
so,
I wrote out the Cuban Missile Crisis in Colombia,
okay,
hiding
well,
under
what
the
better place to
desk,
do that?
right?
Our,
Hiding under the desk in grade
yes,
school.
our famously hot city was probably even hotter at that
Yeah,
time.
that was a long
But
time
yeah,
ago.
well, and you moved quite a lot, right? When you were younger, you lived all over the South, in New Jersey. You were born in Meridian, Mississippi, right? And then
I,
also
wa-
spent a fair amount of time in Georgia. Went to high school in Georgia, in Atlanta, I believe.
I got
Okay.
booted out of high school in Georgia.
Well, you got oh, perfect.
I'm a high
Well,
school
so
dropout.
so how did that happen? Was this an attitude thing? Was it too
Oh,
precocious and not enough attention span, or what was
what,
happening
what,
there?
what do you think?
I some of both. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything.
Were you like a young rebel with a cause?
I was. Uh, yeah, I blame bad role models. I blame John Lennon, but I especially blame Henry David Thoreau. You know,
Oh, well,
yeah.
what a terrible role model. I mean, how
Oh,
could you?
awful, awful. I
The
read
guy,
I read
the
Civil
guy just wanted to drop
Disobedience.
out for a while.
Yeah, I read Civil Disobedience when I was 15, and then I read Walden, and the rest is my life.
And so are those some of the things that got you really interested in environmentalism in particular? Did you spend
Sure.
a lot of time outdoors,
Yeah.
camping
Yeah.
with your parents? I mean, how did that all start?
No, no. I got away from my family. It was an unsettled childhood, moving around a lot. Both
Yeah,
my parents did the best they could, but they both were alcoholics, and I got away from home just as soon as I could.
yeah,
And I went as far as I could. I went to Alaska.
yeah.
I set foot in Alaska in 1975 when I was 22 years old, and I
Hmm.
knew that I had
Yeah.
found home, the
Huh.
home I'd never had.
Yeah. And you lived there for what, 40 years?
40
And
years.
yeah. Do you
Yeah, and
still
if
go
I had a
back?
copy of the book I've just published, I would hold it up and plug
Well,
it.
you know what? Can I do that for you?
Oh, look at that. Nice
I
cover.
actually, I was hoping to get this in time for the interview, but it just
Uh,
arrived last night, and I haven't had time to
so
really crack it open. But I should
thank
say
you.
you can plug it now for our vast number of listeners.
That's hysterical.
That,
Thank you.
yeah, of
And
course,
okay, thank you very much for buying that.
of
And
course,
I will extend the offer that I've extended to all my friends.
right?
Um, that is, you buy the book, and the next time we have a meal together, I'm paying. Okay.
Oh, come on, that's amazing. Well, I may have to take you up on that, at least a drink or something, perhaps.
Okay.
But that
All
that's
right.
so unnecessary. But no, I'm really looking forward, and I should say, just for again people who may be listening, or who may hear this in the future sometime, Silence is So Deep: Music, Solitude, and Alaska. It's your third book, right?
It
Um,
is. It
yeah,
is.
yeah. And is this more of a memoir as opposed to being more strictly about your music and
Yeah,
philosophy?
it is. It is. There's a lot of music in it, but unlike the previous two books, it's not a music book.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and you know, I make no apologies for the first two books. I love them both.
Sure, sure.
Um, but those books kind of just grew over the
Yeah,
course of the years, or they grew naturally out of my process of composing and living and trying to understand the music and what it wanted of me, where it might be leading me. This
right.
book, Silence is So Deep, is the first time I've sat down and thought, okay, at this point in my life, I have a story to tell.
Hmm.
I will try to write a book as a book and tell the story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, I look forward to actually reading the story, and I just think your life is so fascinating. I happen to have sort of a personal interest in the outdoors and in ecology as well. But you really lived that out. You really were a conservationist first, in a way, and a composer second. Or I don't know if we need to order those things, but you were working as a conservationist in Alaska and helped pass the Alaska Lands Act, or at least helped as a lobbyist, right?
Look, I came to Alaska in the 1970s, and I was older than the state was, right?
Okay.
Alaska, I was born in 1953, and Alaska became a
Uh,
state in 1959.
yeah,
And to be a young person in that place at that time
yeah.
was it was a magical sense of possibility.
Hmm.
We were the youngest state, not only Hawaii had joined as the 50th state by that point, but we were the youngest state in terms of the mean age of Alaskans. It was 20 something.
Hmm.
And we were the richest state. We were the most educated state. We were the state with the most elegantly conceived and written constitution. Things felt, the possibilities felt as wide open in Alaska as our horizons did.
Yeah.
And I played a bit part in the passage of the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, which was the single largest land
Yeah.
preservation law in history.
That's
Um,
that's truly amazing.
well, if I never
Uh,
do anything else, I'm pretty proud of that.
yeah.
I'd
But
always been a musician, and I went to school as a composer, um, and I knew from the time I was 15 or 16 that this is what I wanted to do with my life. But
mhm,
right from the beginning, my passion for what I call the real world and my passion for music were inextricably tied. They were one and the same.
yeah, yeah,
And it started again in the South. After
right,
I'd left music school in California, my first wife and I moved into an old farmhouse in the countryside um, south of Atlanta. And
right.
there I discovered the music of the wood thrush,
Okay.
who it turns out was
V-
Henry David Thoreau's favorite
Very
singer.
news. Yeah. Okay.
And that was really the beginning of my life's work. For me, it began with birds.
Amazing. Well, that kind of segues beautifully into talking about the piece that we're going to do here
Mhm.
in Columbia soon. Although I did certainly want to make the viewers aware of your extraordinary history in Alaska. I just know of maybe no other composer with in the states with such a kind of defined sense of place, and someone who really lives that out in their music so beautifully, in so many
Mine,
pieces for so many
thank
years.
you, thank you. You know, um, whatever else you can say about my life, I think it's safe to say it has not been the typical life of a composer.
Yeah, living in some of the time I know, right, in a pretty remote cabin, and much of the time outside of Fairbanks.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining you up there in the dark winter, um, kind of cozy in your cabin, composing all day, looking out the window at the snow and the trees. Is that kind of your reality, or is that just a totally romanticized notion of what your life must have been like some of the time up there? And of course, you were married for a large part of the time. But tell us about your kind of maybe your day-to-day composition habits when you were in Alaska, and maybe today even.
Yeah, they haven't changed all that much,
Yeah.
actually. And yeah, the picture that you just painted in words is both accurate and romantic. But my life
Yeah.
was was that, and I felt very romantically about it.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I still do, even though eventually I had to leave Alaska um,
Yeah.
for a whole complex of reasons. Um, but yeah, my routine there was pretty much what it is here. I
Yeah.
spend most of every day in the studio,
Hmm. Hmm.
alone, composing.
Yeah. Do you find do you find that you have to search for motivation a lot of the time, or do you jump out of bed and just get right to it?
I can't wait to get to work every day.
Yeah,
Um, right now in this extraordinarily difficult moment in our history, not only as a nation, a culture,
yeah,
but as a species.
yeah,
um, I'm finding it more of a struggle to fight against the weight of the moment, um, and and um, and yet I know that the best thing that I can do for the world, or I believe that the best thing that I can do for my world, for my fellow humans, and for myself, is to go to the studio and
yeah,
do this thing that is the only
yeah,
thing I know to do. It's the thing I'm called to do.
yeah. I mean, you must, in a sense, still feel like a conservationist just through music.
I can't, I cannot separate
Yeah,
music from my almost erotic and deeply spiritual love for this miraculous world that we inhabit.
yeah.
It's the
And
source
you've
not only of everything that I do, but I believe that it's the source of everything that we humans are.
right.
Everything. We
Yeah,
don't create anything except answers to
yeah,
creation.
yeah. Well, and you've experienced kind of the the extremes certainly of climates, and now you're in the Sonoran Desert, in southern New Mexico,
In the Chihuahuan Desert.
um, Chihuahuan Desert. I'm sorry. Okay.
Right. Well, people don't know the
Yeah.
Chihuahuan. It's the largest of the four North American deserts, but it's the
Okay.
least known.
Yeah.
It's the coldest, it's the most rugged,
Hmm.
and it's the least known.
Yeah.
And just a little tiny bit of it is in the United States. Most of it is
Is it?
down in the heart of Mexico.
Okay. Okay. Well, look, it's fascinating. I'd love to talk more at some point about these spaces and how they influence your music through the years. But I definitely want to get a little more directly now to the
Yeah.
piece that we're
Let's
going to be
talk about
doing.
complex parts.
Yeah, this is on the Horseshoe, which is actually kind of the historic, really old part of campus, quite lovely. And I
Mm,
was told recently by a patron that it happens to be a spot where migratory birds, often stop.
good.
So I think it's going to be a really lovely location for the piece,
Good.
and the students have been working hard. Um, the piece is fascinating, and I can just say as a performer, I remember getting it. I was happened to be, a part of the premiere of the piece,
Hmm.
and I think the freedom of the piece and the open-endedness of the piece was initially startling, and I'd love to explore that idea a little bit. So basically, of course, players are given a number of animal calls, bird calls primarily, noises, sounds from nature uh, that have been, I don't know if transcribed is the right word, but captured musically by you. And but the group and the players themselves have really complete freedom to decide when to play these calls and how often, how not only to play the individual calls, but really how to structure the piece formally. Um, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is so much freedom. What are we going to do? Uh, and fortunately, our conductor Alan Pearson, who's really developed a spectacular vision for the piece and kind of crafted a shape for it. Although you had certainly suggested the
Yeah.
basic shape that we use, which is kind of taking us through a day and a night. So morning, midday, afternoon, evening, nighttime,
Good.
and then ending with morning again, but in a rather telescoped period. Tell us about though. I just wonder, as a composer, is it frightening to create indeterminate music like this that gives the musicians so many chances to decide what to do, as opposed to being in control of those kind of things yourself?
Um, no, it's actually as much fun for me as it sounds like it is for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, you know, there's a lot of freedom, as you say, in this piece, but it's not as John Cage used to say about his open form pieces. It's freedom, but it's not freedom to do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Sure.
think the reason I don't worry about um, um, the ultimate outcome of a performance, well, there's at least two reasons. One is that I get to work with musicians like you who take it seriously, see it as freedom, not as license,
Right.
and um, and um, will take the spirit of that freedom to heart and make something beautiful that is unique to your performance in your location.
Yeah.
So I trust the musicians. The other thing that gives me that allows me to relax is I trust the notes. Every note
Mm-hmm.
in the piece is written.
Sure. Sure.
Um,
Of course.
and I know that all the material, all the written material is beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's the nature, the fundamental nature of the musical material in 10,000 Birds and um, the nature of birdsong in as we hear it, as we experience it in the world, that um, you recognize this bird,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't know from moment to moment where the bird is going to be or what the bird is going to sing exactly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's part of the fun. That
Yeah.
sense, that constant sense of expectation and wonder and what happens, um, what happens next, and surprise. You know,
Right. Well, and that
that's
it just
part of the fun.
it's truly a blast as a player to have that kind of freedom, to be freed in a sense from the page, and to be just playing these beautiful calls in a way that's completely can be completely spontaneous, influenced by the moment, by who you're communicating with at the time, how many players are involved. Sometimes the calls are played by more than one player, sometimes they're played by solos, uh,
You
or
may be
excuse
in a
me,
call. You may be in a call and response with someone you can't even see,
exactly.
right?
And it's so much more, I think, like nature, I suppose, where I and we've been talking some about this as we prepare the piece. It's important, I think, that the students understand that it's important not to get into an incredibly predictable routine, right? Of like
So
play this call, then someone plays that, and then back
yep,
and forth in a really
yep.
predictable manner. But much more, as you're saying, like the surprise of the moment is important, and the unpredictability of it, and it
And
makes it feel
the
very
pauses,
real.
the pauses between phrases, between your
Yeah.
phrases as an individual performer, are almost as important as the notes that you're playing and the way that you play them.
Hmm.
And this goes all the way back to those first pieces in
Yeah.
Georgia, in 1974, when I realized
These are
that
the songbird songs.
songbird songs, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
which is kind of, there are now pieces that I began earlier that I've completed, but in many ways that's like opus one, right? But
right.
even as a 21-year-old composer just coming in, just discovering my world
Yeah.
and discovering bird songs, I understood that for me, um, it would not be right to try and make a rigid, sequential, fixed
Hmm.
sequence of,
Right.
of musical events. That was anathema to the magic that I was feeling and wanted to
Right.
convey in the music. I have, to be sure, since then, I've done through composed bird pieces,
Hmm.
pieces that
Hmm.
are written out
Yeah.
um, from beginning to end with every vertical relationship between parts specified.
Right.
But
Right.
even in those, I'm trying to evoke something like this
Yeah.
feeling of breath and discovery and surprise.
Yeah.
And you sort of said it. And it's funny. My performance note to the Songbird songs from 1974 say,
Right.
take care not to fall into sing-songy patterns,
Right.
this
Right.
back and forth.
Yeah. Predictable.
So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. That's well, and I think it's really kind of makes the way you often use birdsong like distinctively different than say, I mean, many composers for the centuries have gone to
Yeah.
birdsong, right, in their music, but this the way you do this, giving the performers the choice and of playing these cells and really reacting to each other in the moment is very different than say Mahler using a cuckoo in the symphony in kind of a narrative
Yeah.
form or something
Yeah.
like that, or even
Yeah.
Messiaen in the way he it feels very true to me somehow and so evocative of again of purely the natural world, and not to mention, oh, we're doing this outside,
Well,
which is
that's a key
another
element.
important thing.
No, it's a
Yeah.
hugely important element. Um, it didn't take me long um, when I first began working with bird songs. Um, it didn't take me long to discover two things. One, it was impossible to transcribe them, right?
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
well, let's for a single instrument, let's start with the timbre. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Right.
fact that thrushes have two syrinxes, you know,
Interesting. Okay.
so you can't. I knew that it was impossible and
Hmm.
that I would fail. And of course, in the failing, something else is gained. And I came
Sure.
to feel that what I was doing was not trying to transcribe bird songs, but somehow to translate them,
Hmm.
translate these mysterious languages that I will never understand.
Yeah.
The second thing that I discovered early on, and I think is still feels true, however many years later, almost 50 years later, right? 40 some odd years later, still feels true that it's not just the bird songs, but it's where the birds are. It's the
Right.
place. It's the
Right.
space in which we hear the music. And,
Huh.
space and place are perhaps the central obsessions of my life's work. In one way or another, virtually all of my music, take a piece like Become the
Right.
Ocean,
Yeah. Yeah. Of
has
course.
everything to do with space.
Well, and you have, I think, quite famously, of course, done a number of really thought-provoking works meant to be played outside. Inuksuit, for example, which I've read. You even suggest, this work to do it right may require compasses and sleeping bags and
Yep,
overnight trips
yep,
and
yep,
being spread across hundreds of acres.
yep.
Uh, that, of course, that also involves birdsong, yeah, and also in a
That
way
also
that it is indeterminate. So yeah, it's just fascinating the relationship of your music to the space, and of course that all plays into the I think the impact it can have, and its of course its connection to the natural world. Um, you know, and you've often said that birds were your teachers, and your life's work kind of started with birds. Do you imagine that this is something you're going to just continue to return to? Yeah.
Um, yeah, I do. My
Or that
studio,
even this piece itself, which is open ended in a way.
when
Yeah.
someone wants to do the next installment in this piece, which I imagine as a continuing uh, series of
Yeah.
works in places all over the world. Yeah, when I was young, I worked with bird songs for several years, and then I put them down
Mhm.
with the self consciousness of a young artist. I said, I don't want this to become a shtick. I don't want to be, the American Messiaen, or not that Messiaen had lots of other things going on, but I didn't want to become a gimmick, a thing. I didn't want to become
Yeah.
limited, and I all by the birds. And I also
Mhm.
didn't feel it was true to them. And I knew that I had more to learn from bird songs, but I wasn't ready to learn it. So
Yeah.
I put them down
Hmm.
and saying to myself, well, I bet I'll come back to them when I'm older. And sure enough, the kid was right. And I have, over the last decade or so, I've got sketchbooks full of bird songs from Chile and Mexico and all over the US. So
Maybe we'll see another version come to life of featuring birds from Mexico, perhaps.
I
Um,
I I would love to do a desert birds. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Before we go, I did want to ask you one more thing, which is a kind of a broader question. This is a difficult time for many people, for so many reasons. Are you feeling optimistic right now, and is music helping you kind of get through this time?
Um, I've staked my whole life on music. It's all I've got. It's all I know.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I, I'm I'm continuing to work, and
yeah,
what keeps me working though is not only my faith in music, but my faith in the next generations. I can't say that I'm optimistic,
yeah.
um, but what choice do we have?
Sure,
Do we succumb to despair? Do we just
sure.
surrender? Do we
Hmm.
party like there's no tomorrow? In which case, it's pretty certain
Yeah.
there will be no tomorrow.
Hmm.
Um, and we're all asking ourselves in our hearts and in our souls, what's the best thing that I can do?
Hmm.
And the best thing that I can do is to continue making music and offering it, putting it out into the world, offering it to people who may find some provocation, some solace, some inspiration, some hope in it.
Hmm.
And as I say, what really keeps me going now is my faith in your students,
Yeah.
in people who are in the Greta Thunbergs of the world, people who are in their teens and their 20s now, who are going to inherit this disaster that my generation has created. But they're, I believe in them, and it's just my hope that I can give something that may be of use to someone um, who will truly change the world.
Well, our students are so lucky here at the University of South Carolina to be able to do your piece, experience your music, and I do think it's in good hands. Uh,
I'm sure it is.
and and I know they're taking it to heart and have already been, tremendously moved by the experience. Just frankly, getting to play together again has been absolutely phenomenal. And so, we look forward to doing it on October 3rd. If you're watching this interview before the concert, we hope to see you at around 5:30 at the Horseshoe. Reservations are required because we need to limit the audience size. So please do check out the Southern Exposure website. And John Luther Adams, thank you so much for your kindness in doing this interview and for your music.
It's my pleasure, Mike, and thank you so much. My thanks to your students and to your audience
Yeah.
for making the music happen.
Well, we look forward to it. And take care.
You as well.